Hello, I am Tanya Krishna from financialexpress.com, and today we have with us Mr. Mayank Shah, Senior Category Head, Parle Products. Welcome, Mr. Shah.
Hi.
So first of all, I would like to go around the consumer behavior. Ever since the pandemic, we have witnessed a lot of changes, dynamic and drastic changes in consumer behavior, consumer buying behavior in terms of what they buy, how they buy, etc. So can you elucidate on the evolving consumer behavior and new trends in the FMCG industry, and how is the company, how is Parle Products adjusting to this?
Yeah. So post-pandemic, I think, we've seen some changes happening in consumer behavior in terms of, consumption of products like biscuits or snacks, processed food. We have seen a larger adoption, a larger penetration of, processed food categories. One of the reasons being during pandemic, there were many consumers who tried, some of the categories for the first time, and as a result of which, they have, stayed back with that category. This has helped many subcategories of biscuits and snacks increase their penetration. So while biscuits like glucose or Mari were anyways, very well penetrated, post-pandemic, we have seen, consumption of certain cookies, certain crackers also going up significantly as a result of consumption happening during the lockdowns or pandemic time. That's one thing. Secondly, consumption of biscuits as input to many other things has also significantly improved. So earlier, biscuits were mostly consumed, like a snack, but using biscuits to make various items, be it, bakery items like cake or some other desserts, to using, biscuits in other dishes was something that was done in a big way during pandemic. People were trying out their hands at, various culinary skills. And I think new experiments were done in mostly all families. And as a result of that, biscuit being freely available and easily available. And also, as we all know, I think biscuits were one of the most stocked categories during lockdown. Given that, they were used in quite a few other dishes as well. So be it toppings on Monaco, or be it using Parle for making, cakes or puddings, or for that matter, even, brownies and stuff like that, wasn't otherwise. So I think many consumers tried their hand at, preparing various dishes. And what was used the most was biscuits. So as a result of that, the adjacent use of biscuits beyond, it being just a snack also increased post pandemic. So those are, certain changes that we have observed as a result of lockdowns and pandemic in consumer behavior.
Were there more people, more consumers shifting towards online buying, and how did Parle Products adjust to that?
Yeah, so online buying or e-commerce was another big shift in consumer behavior. While adoption of e-commerce was relatively slower in pre-pandemic days, post-pandemic, because of certain fear of catching virus or probably getting affected by virus, consumers started going to e-commerce sites and e-grocer sites and placing orders there. Along with I think the safety aspect, what also was helping them was the convenience. Primarily during the lockdown, there were instances where there were shops which were shut. There were limited hours during which shops were open. Whereas on e-commerce or e-grocer, consumers were able to place order around the clock. So that convenience, along with the safety aspect, both propelled the shift to online buying. So we saw a huge amount of growth coming in from e-commerce sites or e-grocer sites. So as per a Nielsen study, e-commerce contributed somewhere, or e-grocers contributed somewhere around less than 1% prior to pandemic. If we talk about the current number, it is upward about 3.5-4%. Now, Nielsen was estimating it to be about 10% by 2030. We are expecting that by probably next 2 or 3 years, you will see at least about 10% consumption or contribution or to FMCG coming in from e-commerce. So that's the kind of catalyzing effect which pandemic had on adoption of e-commerce.
But definitely, I would suppose, I'm just assuming you would like to add here, traditional retailers, traditional way of distribution of the products is fair share. It has a larger share for Parle Products. Is it? And currently, how is it as compared when we compare it to the online retail channels?
Okay, so the traditional trade, or TT as we call it, contributes to almost about 89 to 90% of the total FMCG category, and it is in line with the same contribution that even we get our revenue. So if you talk about Parle's various channels, GT or general trade or traditional trade contributes almost about 89% of our total revenues. E-commerce contributes about 3% to 4%, and the balance comes in from modern trade. So what we saw was, while GT was able to retain more or less its share during pandemic, MT was affected because people were scared, going out and buying things from a mall or with GT, it was more like, next door shop, or probably calling up and, asking for a home delivery. E-commerce, as we just discussed, got a fillip because of convenience. MT was the most affected one, although it's recovering now. But as I shared earlier, I think, one channel which got benefited the most was e-commerce or e-grocers.
Around the kind of sales that happens in urban and rural areas, can you give me a percentage of the sales for Parle Products that comes from rural markets as compared to the urban markets? And are you strategizing any plans in order to increase that share in either of these markets?
Yeah. So in terms of contribution from rural to urban, rural contributes about 50 to 53% to our total turnover, whereas about 47-48% comes from urban. In terms of buying power, it's a little opposite. As in, if we talk about the buying power of or FMCG market contribution coming, if I index it to FMCG contribution coming from urban, that's almost about 55%. So we are a little under index there. So we like to probably take that notch up and increase our consumption in urban areas. We have been doing very well or exceedingly well in the rural. But as I shared, that if we are indexing it to the total FMCG market, then the contribution from urban is a little higher, which is to the tune of almost about 54-55. But I would take that with a pinch of salt, because typically one of the reasons of having a higher contribution to FMCG coming in from urban area is because of the distribution. Most companies have better distribution in urban. In fact, it's a challenge ahead of most companies to reach rural. That way we are blessed. If you talk about the penetration of Parle Products, Parle is the most penetrated company in India in terms of FMCG brands. We reach to the nook and corner of India. So right from probably the heights of Himalayas to Kanyakumari, or you talk about from northeast to Gujarat, you will find Parle across. Given that we have very good penetration, it's only normal and natural that we will have a significant contribution coming in from rural India as well.
On a broader basis now, talking about companies, the company's performance the previous year and your outlook for the year 2022, can you elaborate on the figures?
Yeah. So, as far as 22 is concerned, we are very hopeful about this year. Last 2 years of pandemic were a little difficult, especially the second year of pandemic was a little difficult for everybody. And it was not so much about pandemic as much as it was about the input cost. So I think a bigger challenge ahead of most of the FMCG companies is inflation today rather than, pandemic. We have moved past the pandemic. We've been able to learn, adapt, and, grow out of pandemic in terms of, getting the business back on track. While most companies have been successfully able to do that, I think a bigger challenge ahead of most FMCG companies today is inflation. If you look at the kind of input cost and increase in input cost over last 1.5, 2 years period, it has been phenomenal. And I think it's not just input cost. I think it's more than input cost. It's about volatility. So if you look at, be it the geopolitical crisis that we are seeing, in Europe, or be it, the case of, ban on various commodities from various countries. I think that has been affecting not just India, but I think global FMCG industry. Inflation is stoking as a result of that. It's very high across the globe in almost every country. And given the high rate of inflation and the high volatility attached with it, because of the geopolitical situations, the volatility in input cost is also very, very high. This creates a problem for most companies because it becomes difficult to price or price your product. So if I know this is the input cost, I understand, it's one challenge dealing with increasing input cost, but it's altogether a different set of, probably bigger challenge when you talk about volatility. So today, the rates are X, tomorrow they can be X plus Y or X minus Y. Given that, it becomes difficult for you to price your product. And, if you price it at X plus Y, and if the rates don't increase, you are competitively outpriced in the market and you lose share. If you price it at X minus Y, and if the rates go up, or if you don't increase, then you are making losses. So it becomes such a difficult situation for most FMCG companies today. So I think, the biggest challenge ahead of us, along with increasing inflation, is the volatility. Thankfully, in last, few weeks, the volatility is going down, although, the input costs are high and the inflation remains. But hopefully, I think, given the current situation, we expect, the prices of inputs to cool down further and go down further. That hopefully should be, a silver lining. And 2022, 23, that way should be better. So we are hopeful that we are past the difficult phase, and 2022 should be a good year for the FMCG industry.
But can you give me a growth rate, your outlook for the year when we are talking about 2022? Can we get a figure on how it was the previous year and how it will be in terms of the growth rate, CAGR maybe?
Yeah. So as far as foods, or probably biscuits and other allied food categories are concerned, we are expecting a lower double-digit growth. So somewhere around 12 to 11 to 13%. I would say 12, 13% or 11 to 13%. In terms of FMCG, we are expecting a higher single-digit growth. So we are talking about anyways around 8 to 9% growth rate.
And talking about going back to the inflation, are we looking at a price hike by the company? You said you're expecting a cool down in the input cost, but that seems unlikely right now. So will we be seeing a price hike by the company in the coming months, and in what quantum, if yes, and in what all products?
I think most companies have already taken price hike. Following the ban on palm oil by Indonesia, and increasing wheat prices as a result of geopolitical crisis, also increasing crude oil prices, which directly translates into the higher logistics cost as well as higher packaging cost, because packaging is a derivative of crude. We have seen, most companies have already taken a price hike. So we are not anticipating another price hike any soon. At most, probably the prices may remain firm at the level at which they are, or they most likely will go down, because clearly these prices are not sustainable. If these prices would remain, there would be an impact on demand, as a result of which we believe that going forward, these prices cannot sustain. So the only way they can go is go down. Unlikely situation in normal scenario, unless something dramatic happens. In a normal scenario, they would either sustain, I think at best go down. In worst case, they would sustain. So we are not anticipating any more price hikes, because whatever price hikes have been done very recently have factored in this scenario. Last month it was about 5 to 6%. That was keeping in mind the increasing, prices, increased price of palm, increased price of wheat and crude. So that was done last month. It was to the tune of almost about 5 to 6%.
What are your strategies to improve the margins there in such situation?
Typically, I think right now with most companies, it's not about increasing the margins. It's all about either, probably protecting the margins or minimizing the losses. Given the increase in input cost, I think, and as I shared earlier, volatility and a rise in input cost, both, I think most companies currently are looking at either, ensuring their margins, maintaining their margins, or at best, managing them, managing the depleted margins, managing them to the level that they don't get into losses. I don't think, companies currently are looking at improving their margins any further, because I think that's a very optimistic, scenario where
So I'll go back to my question. I'll reframe it. How will we? What are your strategies for maintaining the margins?
Okay, the strategies to maintain margin would currently be to ensure that you are buying right and rationalizing your cost. Any inefficiencies are being rationalized. We are ensuring that we bring in efficiencies in terms of production, in terms of logistics and SCM, even in terms of pack sizes and stuff like that. So there are certain offerings which are being rationalized and certain being promoted to ensure that at an overall level in your company you are managing the margins.
Are you also planning on reducing the product change, or maybe changing the product sizes or pack volumes or weight, as they call it, the shrinkflation? Is that happening at Parle Products?
No, I think that happened across the industry, not just us. That already happened, or at least about 2 times in last 1 year, twice in last 1 year. So that's already done. And I think, now we are at a juncture or at a point where I think any further reduction is not possible. So that was done primarily to, not bother consumers with different price points. Rupees 5 and rupees 10 were classical price points, and I think very convenient price point, both from the point of view of consumer as well as retailers. A big issue if you're moving away from the convenient price point, first is the change. So you cannot price your product at 5 rupee 50 paisa. You don't have a 50 paisa coin. The minimum you have to take in terms of price increase is 20% straight away to 6 rupees from 5. Okay. Even 6 rupees is not convenient, because then the ideal scenario is typically consumer dishing out a 10 rupee note and expecting 4 rupees change back, which is an irritant for retailer. Now, as a result, and typically India still is a monopack market where consumers largely go out and buy a pack at a time. I mean, you have a neighborhood store and you want a pack of biscuit, you go and buy it. It's not still, except for the modern trade where you buy probably your groceries where there's a planned buying for the entire month happening. Most occasions of buying involve buying 1 or 2 packs only. As a result of that, change becomes a major issue and irritant when you are pricing it at all. So 5 and 10 rupees, they become an ideal price point. Now, given that you have kept reducing all this while and ensured that a product is available at 5 rupees, it's only till a level that you can probably reduce the pack. Now, beyond the point, if the pack is not big enough to satiate hunger of a consumer, there is no point in continuing with it. So I think reducing the size of biscuit pack, whatever was to be done has been done. I don't think there is any further scope to ensure retaining the price point.
Right. And can you tell me what all products were part of this strategy? in order to balance the inflation and prices of the
I
product?
think almost every product, I think, across categories, and I'm not saying just biscuits or namkeens or, snacks, or for that matter, even beyond food. I think if you talk about, other product categories, be it, soaps or shampoos or everywhere, I think, the size of the pack have started getting reduced, and they have reached to a level beyond which now it is not really possible. So not just in our, but in many categories, you will see, slowly the smaller price points will start, probably disappearing, and you will have probably the entry point can be, 10 rupees rather than 5 rupees, which is currently the case.
Now moving on to the expansion plans and in terms of retail presence and also product launches in the months to come. So what are your plans there, or are you waiting for inflation to cool down for category expansion and other plans?
So, post-pandemic, we already got into various categories. One of the new entrant categories in which we have just got into is atta. So today you have Parle atta available. Atta is a very big market. Atta is about almost 140 lakh crore size of market annually, of which almost about, I would say 10% is packaged branded atta. And about 20% of that is packaged atta. Some of them, regional brands and stuff like that. But if you consider all India and national brands or proper package, organized segment, package atta market, then it's almost about 12 to 14,000 crore. So and people have, so if you talk about penetration of package atta, that has increased during pandemic, because if you normally consider getting the wheat or grain, getting it milled, there's at least twice you have to go to the next door chakki for milling the wheat for getting atta. So typically 3 trips to the market, one for buying wheat, one for giving it to the chakki guy, and the third one to get it back. So rather than stepping out so many times, consumers are now preferring a convenient way of buying a package atta. So the penetration of, or the acceptance of package atta is increasing, and as a result of which we've got into it. So we have rolled out Parle-G chakki atta in north and west, and we will be very shortly rolling it out in south and east as well. North and west happen to be major markets because the wheat is staple there. We also got into another category, which is cereals. So we recently launched hide and seek, breakfast cereals. So we already got into 2 big categories, and I guess we have, our plate full right now. So before we look at moving to any other category, I think we would like to consolidate our position in these categories before, looking at new categories.
And in terms of distribution or retail presence?
In terms of distribution, retail presence, as I shared earlier, we are one of the largest or the most penetrated FMCG brand in India today. We continue to believe in the India story and the rural story. So we'll continue expanding our operations in the rural going forward while augmenting our presence in urban markets. So if we talk about rural markets, of late we have seen good traction coming in from rural markets, and coupled with good monsoons which have been predicted, we are expecting a robust demand coming in from rural market going forward in 2022-23.
And lastly, what kind of investments are you planning for all these expansion plans and new initiatives, if any?
So we have lined up investments, and we are working on currently, because we all also signed up under the PLI scheme of government of India. So there are investments which are lined up. We are working on it currently, but there is a sizable investment that's planned over a period of next 2-3 years.
Can we get a figure around?
Difficult to put a figure because we are still working on the nuances of it. So there would be part investment going in from our side. There would be certain other aspects in terms of investments which would be probably jointly done along with our business partners. So difficult to put a figure at this stage, but yes, there is work going on there as we have enrolled for the government PLI scheme.
I think that was all I had. Thank you so much, Mr. Shah, for taking out time for sharing
Pleasure
this
talking to you.